It's our second, yeah.
We're rolling.
We are rolling. If I didn't meet you on the way in the door, my name's Katie Patchett. I'm Congresswoman Axne's District Director based here in her Des Moines official office. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I will kick it over to the Congresswoman here for a few brief opening remarks, and then thank you to the folks who submitted questions. We will pull those out of the stack and answer those one by one as we go, but for now we will kick it off to the Congresswoman and have her deliver some opening remarks.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out on this beautiful evening. Can you hear me okay? Do I even need this, Katie? But okay. Whereas my husband never has had a problem hearing me, right? Thank you so much for coming out. Listen, folks, I am so excited to be here back in action doing our public town halls and getting a chance to come out and talk with Iowans across the district. I'll tell you what. Before COVID hit, I was on a roll. We had almost 63 public town halls before that. COVID hit, and we took everything via Zoom till we got to the point where we could do some of it live, and then did some things, you know, within the district for the full year. And now we're back at it, so I'm so excited to have you all join me here on the place where I think I literally announced my first run for election, for the most part, was at the 4th of July picnic here. So it's always fun to come back to my hometown and be here. But there is so much happening right now, and that's why I wanted to start these town halls up, so everybody could hear about the good things that are going on in DC and in the district. And I literally pulled some of the 40 pages of the notes that I had in regard to the rescue plan and the infrastructure bills that we have coming out, the jobs plan and the families plan to help Americans. They are so vast, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't not capture everything that's so important to the people here in this district. But suffice it to say, folks, we've had another really busy year. I know that you all have felt the issues, the struggles, the pain, the growth, so many emotions over this last year. Whether you dealt with health issues, somebody who died, far too many here in our state, our friends and family, because of a limited attention to mask mandates and those types of things that would have been very beneficial to us. Children who struggled to finish their school, children who had to end up their school, even though they've been in it all year long, at home for the last 2 weeks. And we felt so much pain as we've gone through this. Businesses closing, too many sad times. But we're going to move on from that. We're moving on from COVID. We're moving on to a brighter period in this country. We're moving on to what Joe Biden says, build back better. And he's absolutely right. And I'm so excited to be a part of a team that's going to allow us to do that. But what we knew and what Joe knew and what Vice President Harris knew coming into this year with the win was that we had a lot of work to do. So folks, when we started out this year, only 5% of Iowans had even been vaccinated, and now we're at about 50%, over that for folks who've had at least one shot. We had 1,000 cases of COVID a week, and now we're down to a very small number. We're seeing a lot of positive things happening because of all of the economic boost that we gave to so many businesses, individuals, schools, state and local governments to make sure we can help them survive this pandemic and then come out of it really seeing positive things happening. And as a matter of fact, it's gone so well that we're now at a point where we've got to make sure that we get this jobs plan in place so that we can skill up a lot of people in this country to fill these jobs that we have open across this country, where we don't have the skilled labor to do that. And that's why I'm so excited about moving forward with the families plan and the jobs plan. But I did want to go over a couple of key issues for all of you here so you know what happened when we put together these big packages. You hear a lot of it in the newspaper, but sometimes it escapes some of the day-to-day things that are really good for you to know about in your life. So just so you all know, this last rescue plan that we passed out of the House, then out of the Senate, and into law in March to shore up the other the HEROES bill that we had passed last year, really was to take us all the way from the middle of last year, where we were not able to get a bill passed and signed into law, until now, shore people up and help them move forward. So what that meant for Iowa, $1.4 billion in state fiscal relief, $1.2 billion in local fiscal relief. That's counties and cities. There's not one place in this district that I went to and I didn't hear from their mayor that they were running out of money. Whether it was tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands and then millions of dollars here for the city of Des Moines, or $1 million in a town like Melbourne or Preston is a lot of money. So there wasn't one community that didn't suffer as a result of the downtake in revenue. We're shoring that up. Over $800 million in relief for our K through 12 schools who so desperately needed it. And folks, if you like those economic impact payments, it's because we were able to get those out at the beginning of this year when we were not able to, unfortunately, have the Republican Senate and President help us pass it out last year. So now folks got shored up from the $600 at the end of last year, an additional $1,400 to help them be whole. And here's what happened when we did that. That went to 2 million adults and 800,000 children in the state. That is 91% of all the adults in Iowa, and 89% of the children in the state received some type of fiscal stimulus to help us get through. That was a big win for Iowa. Yeah. And now to even think about some of the even other great things that we get to move forward, the child tax credit. So as part of this last bill, we made sure that we didn't just look at how do we shore up families who are really suffering right now, how do we also give them opportunity for the future, and we put forth a $3,000 child tax credit. So that increases families' opportunities by another $1,000. It increases it to $3,600 if your children are 6 years or under. For those of you who are parents here, and I know there's a lot who have young kids now or had them, you know it's not cheap to raise children. Our families need the support to make sure that they can have every opportunity. So we got that through, and that is going to be that is written into law so that now families can have more access and opportunity. We are going to raise people up out of poverty as a result of that. When we passed the expanded and improved child tax credit, it lifts 5,100 children in Iowa 3 out of poverty. Over 5,000 children will have food to eat. I think that's a big deal. And because of the larger benefits, the youngest 2,200 kids under the age of 6 will be raised out of poverty in this district. And I'm getting 3,400 children in this district out of deep poverty with the votes that we've taken, the Democrats have taken in the House to make sure that we get the money in the hands of the people who need it most. And I can't think of people who need it more than children who are going hungry. In addition to that, for those who don't have children, there's additional relief of up to nearly $1,000 through the Earned Income Tax Credit for 181,000 childless workers who are here in this district. And that's a lot of people who are in these frontline jobs. And not to mention, we help keep small businesses up and running. When you walk down here and get your dinner, which I hope you will all do in Valley Junction afterwards, many of these restaurants are open because of the work that we did to bring the Paycheck Protection Program home, the Restaurant Act, and ensure that these people who had put so much effort into building their businesses and really had created community and lots of job opportunity didn't lose out. So we got busy and made sure that they had what they need. So folks, that's just a little bit of what the American Rescue Plan did. But in general, if any of you remember when we had our last economic downturn, and there was some, you were working at the state with me. There were some folks here who were working at the state with me. That was in 2008, 2009, 2010 time frame. And there are many folks who are going to tell you, they're going to say, and I've heard this all before, well, you're increasing the debt load. Shouldn't we be looking at that? Sure, we absolutely should. And we are. But the worst thing that you do in an economic downturn is starve people from opportunity and economic viability. And it was very important that we were able to see this country through to a place of success where we could begin rebuilding in a way that brings equity and opportunity to everybody in this country. And so that's why it was so important to make these kinds of investments. Because when we didn't 10 years ago, and we had the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act money, it was good to have that, but it was a lot of Band-Aids on things. It didn't fix infrastructure. It didn't necessarily create as many long-term jobs as we want. And any economist would tell you coming after that, when we stopped infusing capital into the economy, we saw an increase in unemployment and exacerbated underemployment for years to come. This is what you need to do when your country faces an economic downturn, and it's what we did. And now we're going to build back better, and we're going to get those funds, and we're going to make sure that the wealthiest among us, the 1/3 of 1%, actually pay their fair share. Because I'm tired of looking out into audiences like this and seeing hard-working Iowans who are paying 30, 35, even higher, greater percentage of their income, when we've got wealthy people, when they sell their taxes, they pay 20% capital gains tax. No, folks, this is not right for this country. I don't see any of you probably sitting around being able to pay your bills because of your capital gains increases. Am I wrong? Or do we have some folks out here? Because okay, so growth.
The only thing that, well, when the governor, all those things you passed are great.
But do you take the capital gains taxes?
I invested in Doge when I got some money.
Okay.
And I have been basically, because wages are stagnant, nobody's hiring, the governor cut off benefits, I am now living off of those capital gains.
Okay.
Which means next year I'm going to get absolutely destroyed trying to survive off of, $700 a month off of my investments. Those capital gains taxes are going to come in.
Well, listen, we'll talk about that, and I appreciate that. We're going to try, what we want to do is make sure that we've got enough money coming in to pay for the investments that this country needs. And so, folks, we are going to get busy. We are going to invest in early childhood education so that every 3- and 4-year-old in this country has universal pre-K. I'm fighting to get all-day kindergarten for every child in this country after we fought to get it here in West Des Moines. And now I've realized that, again, across this country, the majority of kids aren't even offered this. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've got community colleges right here in Iowa that are fantastic. And guess what? Free community college, so that we can make sure that every single kid in this country gets a post-secondary education. And that goes along with trade schools and apprenticeship programs. Because I've said this all along. I love our 4-year universities, and that's great for a lot of kids, but we need trade schools, apprenticeship programs, and 2-year programs to make sure that every single young person in this country can get a post-secondary education. And anybody who wants to go back and get reskilled in an area where they can earn more for their family, they should have that opportunity as well. So we're going to make those things happen. At the same time, we're bringing broadband across this country. We are lacking it here in this district, and we need more support. Iowa's going to benefit greatly from this. We're going to address our derelict roads, bridges, pipes, sewer systems, locks and dams, waterways, etc. But not only that, we're going to address infrastructure for today. Because if you don't have childcare, you can't get to work. There's no difference between a bridge being down and lack of an ability to take your child somewhere so that you can actually go get a job. So what we've realized, folks, is if we're going to build back better in this country, it means we need to take into account everybody's lifestyle, the issues that people across this country are facing. Look at those and say, those are what's keeping this country from being successful, and that's where we need to put our effort. That goes to broadband, that goes to childcare, that goes to universal pre-K, that goes to paying our caregivers who take care of folks with disabilities, our elder caregivers, and our child care providers a wage that's full of dignity, and thanking them for all their hard work. So we're going to be taking care of a lot of these issues that have created too much disparity in this country for far too long and have continued to see inequality just grow. Because if we don't do this, we won't get ahead. And as my parents taught me, and my sister who's sitting over there, and my other sister, they said, girls, when you help friends and family, that's great. But when you help strangers alike, you know that our community does better. And we all do better when our community does better. And that's how I know that we're going to build back better under Joe Biden's success. So I'm excited to get moving on these really big platforms. But I wanted you to also know there's a couple of key things that I've been working on outside of that as well. Things like the George Floyd Justice in Policing Bill, which we passed out of the House, the Equality Act, the Violence Against Women's Act, the Equal Pay Act. All of these have been passed out of the House this year, awaiting Senate action. In the meantime, I've had bills that have been passed out and we are hoping to get signed into law very quickly, including my Sergeant Brendan Ketchum Rural Mental Health Veterans Act, which creates a community of support for our veterans as they return home and they get the support they need for housing and for food and for job assistance and mental health and everything that they need so that they can reintegrate and find family and community again for themselves. So that got passed, and I'm just thrilled to be able to help veterans across this country so that they don't go through anything that Brandon went through, which was taking his own life when he couldn't get a bed here in Iowa. And I make sure to include provisions within the rescue plan and working on the infrastructure plan now that benefit Iowans, like the bill of mine that allowed people who received unemployment insurance to write off their first $10,200 and not pay taxes on that. Because I can't imagine, sitting there and receiving unemployment and then you get a giant bill for $1,000 or $2,000 or $10,000 in taxes or whatever, and you have no way to pay for it. So I was able to include that bill in the rescue plan. And now I'm working hard to ensure that the issues that might affect us in the ways that we could pay for with the infrastructure plan are taken care of. Things like addressing stepped-up basis for our family farms and ensuring that they can pass their farms on to their children. Ensuring the same thing for small businesses, that they continue to have opportunity. So I'm so excited to be out here to share these things with you, and I welcome any questions, comments, or thoughts that you all have, because honestly, the best advice comes from the people in this district, and I take it back and put it to work. Thanks so much for being here.
Okay, our first question comes from Catherine and Gloria from West Des Moines, and their question is, how will the infrastructure bill help with child care?
A lot. But I went over quite a few of those pieces. But first and foremost, it's the universal pre-K. For every dollar that is spent in supporting early education, in particular in universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds, it returns itself 8 times. This is such an important issue for this country. It is keeping families from being able to work. It is keeping children from being able to learn. And in the end, what that does is limit economic opportunity for that child and that family. And so it's about time we get this done. In addition, as I mentioned, I'm fighting to make sure that we can also have universal kindergarten. I don't want us to have universal pre-K and then there's this gap where kids can't have universal kindergarten. So we're fighting for that as well. Within the bill is a lot of support for our child care centers to ensure that they can clean up and operate and be ready to go and expand as families need them. We have 25% of our state here, folks, that's in a child care desert, meaning there is zero, no place to take your child if you need to get to work. No place. So when I hear this business about, oh, people aren't going back to work because they got this extended unemployment, no. Is there a handful of people? Maybe. They're not going back to work because there's no child care. They're not going back to work because they're still scared of COVID. They're working with employees who, haven't got vaccinated and they have an underlying condition. They're not going back to work, too, in many cases, because they get no family leave, they get no sick days, they get nothing. And a lot of people were fed up. So you know what? It's time we change this, just like this young man right here. It's time we change it so that everybody gets an opportunity. And that's what we're going to be doing in this bill. And it starts when our kids are young.
Okay, our next question comes from Mary from New Virginia. And her question is, help me to feel hopeful about the future of our country.
Where's Mary? I'll come give you a hug. Listen, it's been a rough, it's been a rough year with COVID. Certainly the insurrection on January 6th really made a lot of people question our country. and other Americans and community members. But what I can tell you is that we're a better country than that. We always have been. We've been through adversity before. We've come out on top. We have some real issues, though, that we're facing right now. We have some real fundamental issues that we're facing in regard to what we call a republic and the democracy of which it serves. And right now, we have some people who I work with who don't even believe we have a valid president, and who are calling the insurrection the attack on our capitals, where we saw Americans beating Capitol police officers with an American flag. Some of my colleagues are calling that just like another tour at the Capitol. Listen, I've been on a tour before. I went with Senator Grassley's office. I didn't see anything like that. So, you know, this is where we're at. But the deal is, this country wasn't founded on the people who are serving out in Washington right now. This country was founded on citizens like you, who said, I'm tired of this, who said, I'm looking for a better place for my family, who said, we're going to escape this tyranny and we're going to find a place where we can have some ownership of our lives. And unfortunately, we have too many elected officials right now who are fighting back against the democracy that we have. And it's a tough place. And it shows itself in the policy and the difficulty that's spread to the American people. And I know that isn't a positive place for you all to be, to see a divisive Congress, to see some of my colleagues who bully my other colleagues. We see then that practiced in real life. What goes on in the highest chambers of Washington is just a smaller version of what we're seeing out in public because of leaders who have allowed this country to be their own personal, for their own personal gain, and not for the betterment of the people that they serve. So I have hope, because I know most Americans are better than that. I know that we've got good people on both sides of the aisle. I work with good people on both sides of the aisle. But we're in a struggle right now, and it's time for every American to stand up and realize that, and fight back against voter suppression, dark money in politics. These are the things that have brought our country down. And it's time that we stand up and take it back for who we are, so that every young person that's sitting here today thinks that their vote actually counts. Because right now, if I was a young person, I'd be wondering what some of these people think about my vote when they're running around the country trying to put laws in place that limit ability for people to vote. So these are important things. It's H.R. 1 that we passed out of the House. First and foremost, 2 terms now, we've passed House Resolution 1, which is a sweeping ethics, get money out of politics, and address voter suppression in this country. The fact that we cannot see that bill getting passed right now, that the Senate is struggling to pass that bill, I'm astounded that anybody who is in an elected office can't vote for a bill that takes influence out of elections and takes and allows people to have free and fair voting. I would argue that people who think that this bill isn't relevant, I don't know if they're fit for those types of jobs. Because if you're not willing to stand up for our democracy and the ability for everybody to vote, then we need more people. So what I think is going to happen is that there's going to be people who stand up and say enough of this, just enough. We're going to have good Republicans stand up and say, I've had it with this. We're going to have people stand up and say, it's got to get done, and it's going to come from you. So don't lose hope, because I got hope in all the faces. Little Sam that I saw, this little kid when I came up, all these young people who are sitting here, they're smart, they're courageous, and they're our future. And that's why I'll never give up hope, because they're too good to give up on.
Our next question came from Karen from Kellogg. What are the Congresswoman's priorities regarding the American Jobs Plan, and what can she do in Congress to help increase bipartisan support for it?
Okay, well, a lot of priorities within the jobs plan, but I gotta tell you, the most important things for Iowa to get done, right? Broadband, 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 broadband. Can I say it any louder? We have got to get broadband in this state. It's just imperative. Whether we're talking about economic viability for small businesses on Main Street, children being able to learn instead of sitting outside of McDonald's trying to get internet connectivity, which they do in a lot of places in this district, or healthcare, delivery of healthcare. We've got to get broadband here, number one. Number two, the other big piece that we've got to get out of this, childcare. Guys, some folks will say, they say, oh, I don't believe that that's infrastructure. As a mom, as a working parent, I can't imagine something that's more debilitating to getting a job than not having childcare. So if you can't see that as something that we need to invest in, as being vital to the growth of our economy, then your version of infrastructure is really not today's version. We've got to update to today's version. And so my version of what's important to Iowa includes a lot of things, but it definitely includes broadband and childcare.
And the bipartisan bit. How do you get more members of Congress to see this as something, of the House, to see this as something important?
Well, and we're continuing, a lot of us are still continuing to work very much in a bipartisan fashion. I mean, all my bills are still very bipartisan. You chip people off one by one. You chip folks off who maybe, have a different understanding of it, depending on where they come from, and the infrastructure needs that they have there. We talk to a lot of moms, you're sure. We know moms we got a lot of moms in the House, and things like childcare are really important. I've worked on childcare bills with Republican colleagues who understand how valuable this is. So we chip them away on the issues that are important and talk to them about the reality of what those issues really do mean economically. And I'll tell you, one place I always go back to, it's not the place I like to be, but it's a place where we can find, is to talk about impact on the economy. I wish everybody could just change and do things because it's the right thing to do, but that's not always easy. But the economic story behind getting childcare, it's a phenomenal story. We are literally losing money in this country because of our lack of childcare. Every other country that's successful has free childcare, or it's in your business or whatever. We're so far removed from that, and we're falling farther behind. Folks, we're falling behind countries like China as they go around the world and build bridges and roads in other countries and build up a massive support network for their country and their objectives. Do you think they're not going to use those roads and bridges when they need to go find natural resources in these other countries? America's falling behind because we have not invested in our infrastructure. We're talking childcare here, but we haven't invested roads, bridges, airports, pipes, sewer systems. Our energy grids are at risk. We've seen that. Our cybersecurity is at massive need of overhaul. These are major issues for our country. If I'm hoping to also get with some of my Republican colleagues who I know understand the national security issues around infrastructure as well. So I say, talk to people in the different areas that you know are important to them. It's what I do. If I need a colleague in Detroit on something, I don't ever hesitate to tell them every ball bearing for every Ford Explorer is made in our district. And we support everything they do. So, you gotta find those places where you can get somebody to the table and at least try and get some movement.
I would like to second what you said about China investing. I'm originally from Latin America, and both Colombia and Costa Rica I've seen over the last 20 years. Colombia and Costa Rica have been allies of the U.S. forever. China has come in and built every new highway, every new bridge where the U.S. has not. And I see it. I live there part of the time. And this will come back to haunt us, and I believe you're right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Our next question comes from Nancy in Grimes. How can we ensure that the Hcbs Access Act and infrastructure plan get passed to improve supports for disabled and caregivers?
Yes, we've got to get that passed. It has to be a part of this infrastructure bill. Essentially, folks, what they're talking about is it's a caregiver support. Caregivers right now are we've got to do better by this. We have so many people in this country in a sandwich generation who are taking care of kids and their parents. We have folks who are in their 50s, maybe in their early 60s, who left their jobs early in their best earning years to take care of their parents. What that's done has increased their expenses. They have no job now. They had to leave their job to take care of their elderly parent, and yet they have no income coming in. Well, one thing I just did was I just wrote a bill to allow $1,200 of exemption for caregivers. So if it's your spouse that needs care and you need to leave the house for 2 hours and you need to hire somebody to come in, you can get some support for that. We've got a lot further that we need to go, but we need to go do more. And so the Hcbs would increase wages and support and necessary structural functions for caregivers within our skilled nursing centers, for folks with disabilities, for essentially vulnerable populations across this country. It is about time we started paying these people appropriately. I mean, when we have folks who are taking care, my dad was in a skilled nursing center a couple of years ago. Those folks are making $12.50 an hour. They're barely bringing home, what would that be then? $25,000 maybe or something, barely. That's before taxes. Take the taxes out, take rent that costs here in this type of town. They've spent all their money. There's no money to save anymore, and they're in debt. And yet we expect these people to come into our homes, to go into their workplace, and have the empathy and the gentleness and the education and the understanding of how to take care of people who can't do that for themselves. But we can't make it any worth more than 10 or 12 bucks. We cannot fill these positions. And this is what's going to help us do that. The Hcbs is going to help us do that. Because right now, people are not taking these positions because they can get paid more at a manufacturer's. Or they can get paid more at some other location, so they're doing it. And we have no place for the people who are in need. We don't have enough workers for them. So it's got to get done.
But to expound upon that, there are 16,000 individuals in our state that are currently on Medicaid waiver waiting lists, including my son, right? You met him. He does not speak. He is not independently ambulatory, and yet we have been waiting almost 3 years to receive services on a health and disability waiver. We have no respite. We have no case management. There are no supported community living. And we have someone else in our family who is a 4-time stroke survivor and full-time wheelchair user. I am the face of your sandwich generation. I would love to be teaching 7th grade Spanish, but I am this child's full-time case manager. And if something doesn't change, then all of us are going to be finding ourselves in this same situation. If we don't start funding these Medicaid waiver programs, and there are 7 of them in our state, to help the 61,000 individuals age 5 and over who need help with basic daily life functions like toileting, then they're going to be doing what I'm doing, which is walking into places and having to change their child on the dirty bathroom floor because we don't have the supports and caregiver infrastructure. Medicaid can't wait any longer.
And we have provisions in this bill that address Medicaid and CHIP, and I'd like to talk to you afterwards, and we're going to get your information. Let's see what we can do to help you now, and I want to get you all the information of what the plan is, and then figure out how we can help you navigate this. And I don't think I need to say any more. I mean, Look at this great family here. How often do we need to hear this? How often do we need to hear this? And Jeff Bezos what's he doing? He's going into space next week or something?
$10 billion.
Because Jeff Bezos doesn't have to pay any taxes?
My wife gave up her career because of all the red tape that goes in with the child that has special needs. Great career. We have 2 children, so we're trying to get by on a single income, and it's hard to stretch every month, and everything that my wife has just mentioned impacts not only us, but a great deal of America, and we need more help and more people fighting for these people that don't have a voice.
That's right. And I just was doing a caregiving roundtable today, and we had representation from the disabilities community, and that's one of the issues we talked about. One of the other big issues that we have with folks with disabilities is we've got a lot of people with disabilities who are ready and willing to get into the workplace, and we are doing very little to make sure that that happens. And we have a skills deficit with great people who could take these positions, and yet we have not set up structures to help them with that. We've struggled for so long, and it's time that we fix this. But this is exactly right. This is exactly why we're doing this infrastructure bill. This inequity has gone on for far too long. You should not have to leave the workforce if you don't want to leave the workforce. You should have the resources that we can help you with to provide for your family. What this ends up doing, and we all know this isn't just an impact on you now, and you know this is more than anybody and your children. For not just, the first thing is the healthcare issues. How do we make sure your life is better, and your son's life is better, and that your daughter's life, everybody so that you can get a minute's peace, you can do what you need to do, you can refresh yourself too. And your son, what can we do better for healthcare? You just mentioned it. We have so much we could be doing better there. But then in the end, what all this does, everybody, it costs this family tens of thousands, if not millions actually, with you out of their success for their lifetimes. Not just the income that, I'm sorry, what's your first name?
I'm Nancy.
Nancy, thank you, Nancy. That Nancy brought in, the expenses they put out to take care of your lovely son. She's lost her wages. If she tries to get back into the workforce, notoriously, in particular, women go back by years on end. She'll have a tough time ever making what she made. And think about the Social Security she's just lost. So when we think about these issues, they're not just the surface, folks. If we keep hearing more people say, oh, we don't need to help with child care, we don't need to help do any more for people with disabilities, we literally strap people, not just for the moment in time you make that decision, but for their entire life and their family's life to come. We have an obligation to help you. When people like Jeff Bezos can walk away from paying the appropriate tax share, and we don't have enough to fill our coffers to help out people like your son, that's no place a country should be. So that's all we're asking in this bill to pay for these types of things, is that the richest of richest people, who can apparently go to outer space, they have so much money, that they literally pay so that Nancy's family can have a fair shot. I don't think that's asking for a lot. So I appreciate you coming in from Grimes and being here and telling us this, and we're going to talk afterwards and we'll connect with the team.
Our next question comes from Gregory from Des Moines. Can you discuss the work you did in Washington to address the manufactured housing problem in Iowa?
Yeah. So we have manufactured housing communities here in Iowa, and if you remember, maybe some of you remember old school mobile home courts. And unfortunately, there's a pattern here of greed sometimes. It's really, unfortunately, we have predatory investors who have decided to take advantage of states like Iowa and come in and purchase mobile home courts or modular housing communities. jack up the rent underneath their homes 60, 70%, which they've done here. A company called Haven Park. They're not the only one. And so what's happened is these folks who are paying maybe $250 or $300 a month to have their modular home on a plot of land, it went up to $550 or $600. Once again, how do you double your rent expense at the last minute and think that that's even a feasible thing? So what's happened, unfortunately, is these folks know it, and so they come in and they literally have videos for their investors and they say, these are the best markets we can get into. These people can't leave their homes because they don't have enough money, so they're strapped. That's what they say. So you know what? That's not going to happen on our watch. And it passed 2 bills out of the House, and we're going to get these through the Senate, where we protect these folks, where we allow them the same graces that anybody who rents a place gets. You know, they get notice if a rent increase is going up, and the higher it is, the longer out it has to be. So if it's going up by 50%, you know well over a year in advance if that's occurring. It gives you a chance to sell your own property without moving it, because right now that's not an option. You got to take it out of that court before you sell it. It allows you to negotiate if you have a late rent payment. That's pretty normal in most people's world, but not normal for folks living in these communities. So these are a couple of bills. And then the last thing, because it's a couple of bills that I kind of scrunched together with different things, but I've set up an opportunity for a grant system for nonprofits and individuals in those communities to be able to pool together the money and buy their own land. So once and for all, they can be their own homeowners and everybody else can just stay out.
All right, we have time for one more question before closing remarks. We're bumping it up on the hour here. This last question comes from Mary of Des Moines. Will you support and sign on to H.R. 3, the Lower Drug Prices Now Act?
Mary, wherever you are, yes, I will. I will sing about it. I will dream about it. Oh, Mary. Yes, Mary, I will. And listen, H.R. 3 is about as good a prescription drug bill as you could possibly get. It will allow us to negotiate basically almost the top 1,000 drugs used in this country over a period of a few years, essentially 250 drugs a year. Here's what's happening. Who's paying taxes here? Raise your hand. Come on, Gunnar, I've seen you pay taxes. Pay tax, even if you got, raise your hands. Okay, your money is going for research and development of good drugs that we need here in this country, the prescription drugs that we need here in this country, right? Your taxpayer dollars are going for that through the NIH and all the Department of Health and Human Services, things that we do, right? Support these pharmaceutical companies, help them do that. We have on the books a negotiation because of the ACA that does not allow us to negotiate the cost of prescription drugs because of the provision put within that. Therefore, other countries are buying our drugs at a cheaper cost than you are. Much cheaper. Much cheaper. So why are we selling our hard-earned, researched drugs that we develop here to other countries for half the price that we're paying for them? That's what this bill does. And guess what happens to those savings? Those savings go back, and we cover in Medicare vision, dental, and hearing. Hello. What a wonderful opportunity that would be. So we're working really hard, Mary, to get that through. Somebody asked me what do they think is stopping it, and I said I really have no idea, other than the fact that their pockets are fleeced with the money from big pharma companies. Because I don't understand how they would stop something that could literally save people's lives and benefit every single person in this country, including their own families who overpay for their prescription drugs. So we're going to keep pushing for it, folks, because it has to get done, Mary. This will save thousands of dollars for families across this country, and it's about time. Yeah.
Cindy, if I could just say something. Because I am a veteran, I have the access to the VA hospital, and because the VA is able to negotiate the cost of their drugs, I pay $5 a month for Lipitor. Okay. Now, if I were not doing that, I would be going through Medicare, these other things. I'd be paying a lot more. I'm sure there's other people here on Lipitor half the nation's probably on what they're doing. My point is that they could bring the price dramatically down. And this is done because they are able to negotiate. And so that's an example.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it just goes to show that, first and foremost, I'm really glad that I was elected to represent this district. Some of you who know me from the past work I've done, you know there's nothing I like more than being effective and efficient in solving problems. There are vast amounts of problems. How are you paying $5 for Lipitor and somebody else is paying, what, $2.50? Criminally, I
I
remember.
don't want it to change for me.
Yeah. Well, we've been, my husband and I have a small business, and we've had multiple insurance through years, and he could have the same prescription, and it'll be $50 somewhere, then $2.50, then $25, and you're like, what the, your health didn't improve because we paid 10 times more, but okay. So yeah, this is where we're at. So I mean, what I see, guys, right now is just so much opportunity for this country. We have a lot of issues, but they're fixed. These are nothing that are insurmountable. It's policy changes. So what does that mean? It means we need continued support from the citizens of this country to step up like we've done and we've been known for in this country in the past, to push for these changes again, to keep electing the right people. Keep me out there so I can keep pushing for these for these issues, because we've got to get to a point, Mary, where we pass this. The benefits are just far too great, and we cannot have one more parent who comes to me and says, I cannot afford my daughter's diabetes medicine, so I'm working 2 jobs to make that happen. But she even got to take her full diabetes medicine because of her mom. I talked to another woman who's like, she doesn't take her full diabetes medicine because she can't afford to do that and keep her lights on. So we do nobody any good when that woman can't be healthy. It hurts her family, it hurts her community. We are the community. This country is a community. And it's our job to help each other get the resources we need to live more successful lives.
All right, that brings us to the end of the hour. I do want to real quickly, I know there were a few questions that we didn't get to, or if we didn't touch on a topic you were hoping to discuss, could the team members from Congresswoman Axne's office just raise your hand really quickly? You can find one of us afterwards if you have a question that you want to address, and we'll make sure that we help you out. But otherwise, Congresswoman, I'll turn it over to you for some brief closing remarks.
Well, first of all, I'd like us all to give a nice round of applause to our wonderful West Des Moines officer who came out to be with us tonight. We're very grateful for your good service here, and our community is very thankful. Folks, thanks for coming out. Thanks for those really solid questions, that really thoughtful and inspiring. And thanks for standing up and caring for your community members over this last year. We wouldn't have made it through if you hadn't checked on your friends, you hadn't checked on your neighbors, you hadn't helped somebody out who needed it. And so we're so grateful that you did that. I can do a lot out in DC, but the rubber hits the road when it comes to how people interact, treat each other, and move this country forward. You're equally, if not more important to the whole scheme of things than I am any day of the week. I take your ideas and I help make your lives better through better policy. So thank you for coming out tonight. Continue to stay informed, continue to spread the truth, and continue to push back against what you know in this country is not the American way. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great rest of the week.